You've been the president and CEO at Closing the Gap for 5 years now, and you've had quite a successful career prior to that as well. You trained as a surgeon in South Africa, and then you moved to Canada. Can you share a little bit about yourself and that journey to Canada? What made you decide to move here? And what would you say about the immigrant journey?
Well, the immigrant journey is a long one. Obviously one makes your mind up to make that move long before you actually make the move, because there's quite a process. I had a very happy and a very long career in South Africa in the healthcare system there, both initially in the clinical world and then in healthcare leadership and in health insurance and managed care, and just felt it was time for a new challenge. So a couple of years before I moved here, applied for permanent residence. At that time, fortunately, they were taking in doctors with leadership experience on a scarce skills residence permit. So I got that and then made the move in 2013. Sold up everything in South Africa and moved across to Toronto.
So that was about 8 years ago that you made that move. How did you decide on Canada, of all places?
I had been coming to Canada for a number of years. I have friends who moved from South Africa to Canada. They live up in Newmarket. And every time I went to the US, I quickly flew up to Toronto and spent some time with them. So I got to know a couple of people up here and got to know Canada. And when I decided to make the move from South Africa, I was looking at a number of places. I looked at England because I'd spent a lot of time in England. I looked at Australia, but eventually decided on Canada. And really, it comes back down to the value system and the people here. And that's really been validated by my time here. It's been a wonderful experience.
So you're glad you made the move?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
Every day. Less so in winter, but nevertheless very happy I made the move.
That vision, the dream you had before you moved to Canada, is it everything that you imagined? How different is it?
I suppose, on a personal level, it's at a professional level, it's been everything I've expected and more. I don't think I was quite prepared for how welcoming Canada and Canadians are. Essentially, when I moved here, I knew, a handful of people and have been, and continue to be bowled over by how welcoming everyone is, how friendly everyone is, and how invested in integrating you people are. So on that level, it's been a great move, and I have a huge circle of friends, and I've enjoyed working in the healthcare system here. So the healthcare system took a little bit of getting used to. It was very different to what I was used to in South Africa. Being, a publicly funded system here, I was, used to being part of a very different system. So that took a bit of getting used to. But again, once I was used to that, have actually found it very stimulating.
When you reflect back on your journey to getting where you are today, who do you think, maybe a person or maybe the situations in your life, who or what has had the most influence at each of those different phases?
Oh, I think lots. If I look back, and it is a long time back, if I'm looking back to childhood, first of all, it sounds like a cliche, but my parents, who brought me up to treat everyone with respect, which is the foundation of any successful person, is being able to treat people with respect. That for me is the minimum requirement. So so from that, I was very lucky to have very grounded mentors in my parents. My father was an entrepreneur and a businessman who did a number of things. And then through my working life, clinically, I can tell you my first boss in the surgical field, also a great mentor, very level-headed, gave me great advice on, how to keep calm in difficult situations. And then, I've been lucky enough to work with great people, not only people that I've worked for, but people who've worked for me, who've given me, great advice along the way. So, a number of people. And I think the important thing is that you've got to be able to pick those up along your way and use those to build, what you eventually become.
And for you personally and professionally, what are some goals that you are currently working on?
Well, so professionally, really, I think I mentioned earlier on, is I would like to see the healthcare system in Ontario and Canada, because we work across a couple of provinces, more integrated and be able to provide better services to people. Because I do think that there are so many transition gaps in the care that we provide to people, that I'm hoping that in my career lifetime, I'm going to see enough change and be part of that change to allow for that integrated journey to be understood by the people who are receiving the care and their families. So there's a lot to be done on that front. I do think home care is a very big part of that. I do see home care as being the solution to many of the acute care and long-term care problems. there's no doubt there's an enormous and very important role for acute care and for long-term care, but home care, it can be the protector of those sectors, so that only those people who have to be in long-term care or have to be in acute care are there, but otherwise that they are recuperating in whatever is their home and being supported with various clinical and non-clinical supports. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on that front, and I'm hoping to be part of that over the next, few years.
And for yourself personally, Leighton, what's your vision for the next 10 to 15 years?
I don't see myself as being an early retiree. So, I see myself as being late career, there's no doubt, but lots for me to do. And I see myself working in this environment, for, still a number of years. I do see that when that changes, I'd like to see myself more in a coaching and teaching role. I do think it's important that when you transition from a leadership role or anything like that, you've got to be able to give back as well and transfer some of that. I hope I'm mature enough then to know which pieces to pass on and which not. But so I would like to see myself not only doing some mentoring, coaching, and teaching, but also some board roles. I do think it's important. I've just joined a new board. I've just joined the board of the Dorothy Lay Hospice. A cause I feel very, very passionately about is a good death. And so I see myself doing board roles for quite some time. And I think that's something that doesn't have to have a time limit on it. That's something you can do well past sort of normal, formal retirement is do board roles, is give back then, sure. Yeah. And then I'd like to spend a little bit more time traveling, which one doesn't really get enough time to do when you're working. Spend a couple of months a year out of the country doing something else.
And as you were climbing up, Leighton, into your, even as a surgeon, and you were moving up into more senior roles and then into the corporate world and, CEO roles, how did that impact your personal life in any way, if it did? Because we often hear this, executives have a heavy workload. You're always paying a price to something. So how did it have any impact on your own personal life, if in any way?
I don't think it had an enormous impact. Listen, I have a very supportive partner who is also a very busy person, and that helps. If you're both busy as well. So it gives you that understanding when you've got to make that extra trip, or you have to do that late night meeting or get something ready. So I think that support is important. But I think the ability to get some level of balance is also important. And I've tried to do that, make sure that I get away when I do. Listen, I'm very bad at unplugging altogether. So I also make sure that when I'm away, I'm only looking at emails for, a short period of the day. But that actually makes me a better person while I'm away, because then I'm not stressed about what I'm getting back to. But finding that balance. So no, I don't think, I've always made sure that I get a lot of exercise in, which is good for my mental health. And then personal time as well, making sure I've got that personal time. So I'm sure there are times where it hasn't been optimal, but I don't think it's had too many detrimental effects. I might need to ask the people around me, but I think it's worked well.
Yeah, you'll have to ask your partner.
Sure.
That's so true. Having the right support system around that partner who understands your work, who understands what's important to you. Again, coming back to those shared values.
Sure, absolutely, sure. And we work in very different fields, but we have a very good understanding of the fields that we both work in. So, it does help.
Right. And how many years of partnership has this been?
24 years.
What would you say are the secrets?
Communication, respect, trust, those things, but communication and honesty, that's very important as well, is traveling, having fun, making sure that you are taking out to have fun. And it is something you have to focus on, because it's very easy to get really sidetracked down a path and not have fun. So right. Having fun is absolutely critical.
And if you had to give advice for ambitious leaders who are one day looking to, grow into your shoes, Leighton, what would you say?
I think it would always be the foundations of making sure that you are respectful of everyone, but also learning from everyone. So for me, that's been absolutely critical, is going through and learning from people along the way, picking up pieces of advice, learning what not to do again. But I think also is not trying to do everything all at once. So often aspiring leaders are looking to, they put an agenda for themselves and say, by this time I want to do this, by this time I want to do that. And that just creates stress. Rather focus on that leadership journey, enjoy the leadership journey. And as you enjoy it, those opportunities come. It might not fit completely in your timeline, but actually, go with the flow. Really, don't put yourself under pressure. Make sure you're enjoying it. So for me, and also lifelong learning. I mean, I think those are the things you have to continually be reading. We have so many things at our disposal now with podcasts, webinars, so many things to do now that weren't always the case. So lifelong learning, and not just learning in a defined sphere, lifelong learning outside of that as well, to make you a more interesting and interested person, is make sure you've got some balance.